This is Douglas Crosby, the MMA judge everyone has been talking about. Most people don't know what he looks like, and it's very difficult to find pictures or especially videos of him. He's also a stunt coordinator or actor, and it seems like he's been a part of a lot of big films. He seems to also love music, movies, and pro wrestling. A man of culture. There are a lot of stories about him over the past 12 or so years, and some claim serious criminal behavior, which I'm going to get to towards the end. He also seems to be that guy who needs to be the smartest in the room, always using fancy words, quoting Shakespeare, and using lots of semicolons.
The time approaches that will, with due decision, make us know what we shall say we have and what we owe.
Most of the interviews he's done are on Chael Sonnen's podcast. They've known each other for a long time, but nearly all of them have been scraped from the internet. Aaron Bronstetter managed to find a couple of them, which I'll link below, but there's one specific podcast episode I can't seem to find, and of course it's the one with all the good stuff. Chuck Mindenhall wrote an incredible piece about Doug Crosby in 2015, mainly centered around the interview he managed to secure with Crosby in a Russian bathhouse. I didn't read it back then, but it paints an incredible picture of Doug Crosby. If you haven't read it yet, please do. It's genuinely one of the best pieces of MMA writing I've ever come across. On December 15th of 2022, which is today, Chuck Mindenhall went on Spotify Live with Ariel Helwani and a few others and spoke about that interview.
And it was only there while we're sitting in the sauna and then in this ice bath thing, or like ice sauna, that he finally starts to tell me about judging. And this was the weirdest part, man, because as it's happening, I'm like, he's going on about, Wayne Gretzky quotes about where the puck is going, not where it's at or not where it's been, where the puck is going. So in other words, he's predicting in his judging where things are going. And this went into his criteria. This is before they modified the criteria. So he's telling you his kind of viewpoint. And he's kind of talking about it like, well, look at the rematches with Frankie Edgar and BJ Penn. Like, Frankie kind of started to pull away, right? Like, and I'm like, yeah, he did. He's like, he's kind of looking at you like, we see, that's where the puck was going all along.
It seems like the first thing Doug Crosby did to really upset fans was at UFC 112 in 2010. Directly after the fight, he was getting hate for the scorecard, and he went on a long rant on the underground MMA forum, and he titled it, "The Judging Genius Returns from the Middle East." It's really pretentious, but please pause and read it if you haven't. He's been an active judge almost as long as I've been alive, but this week he's under scrutiny for 2 scorecards. Paddy Pimblett over Jared Gordon, where he gave Paddy the first and second, and Danny Sabatello over Raufeon Stots in Bellator, where he gave Sabatello every round. That scorecard was the first time in the history of the MMADecisions.com database that the loser of a fight got a 50-45. He's had lots of controversial scorecards before, and he's also judged fights where there seems to have been a conflict of interest because he knew the fighters or the camp. AJ Agazarm, a high-level BJJ player and student of the Nick Diaz Academy, claimed Crosby shouldn't have been judging his fight against Chris Lencioni.
Yeah, the first thing I noticed was that there was a judge that shouldn't have been there in judging the fight. Douglas Crosby, he's had relationships with me, he's had relationships with my opponent. He's definitely not impartial. So I don't know what business he had being on the side and judging that fight.
Crosby also judged the fight between Al Iaquinta and Jorge Masvidal when he openly had beef with Iaquinta's gym, and he gave Masvidal all 3 rounds. The score wasn't egregious. It can definitely be argued that it's correct, but the conflict of interest is the problem. Let's get to the big stuff. Years ago, Chael Sonnen told a story on a since-deleted episode of his podcast about a guy named Steve. Steve is almost certainly Doug Crosby. This YouTuber figured it all out months ago, and it's got more details, original clips, so go check that out. It'll be linked below. In this clip, Chael is talking to the victim of the situation, John. This story takes place during the filming of The Wrestler, which released in 2008.
I should probably give a real an elevator synopsis of what happened, but you were on a movie set, and you were with 3 friends, Steve, Jared, and Tommy. You went into a holding room, what we in the business would call like a green room, which was reserved for the stuntmen. And you were the first one in the door. When you went in, you saw a trap door in the floor. You opened the door. It was very dark. You didn't know where it led. And somewhere you thought, you know what? It'd be best if nobody knew this door was here. You pulled a couple of blankets over it. You threw your bag on top. The next one through the door was Steve. His spidey senses go off. He removes your bag. He removes the blankets. He opens the trap door. And then for reasons that are very unknown, he tells you to get in. The other two guys come to the door. They think this is a great idea. A wrestling match ensues. Eventually, a knife is pulled and put to your belly. You're told to get in the hole where you're fighting to not go in.
The victim is named John Trosky. He's a former pro wrestler, a stuntman, an actor, and a college professor who tells Chael he has a dual master's. He's very well spoken, and he seems like a solid human being. Here he is with Nick Cage, and here's him getting tackled by Troy Polamalu. John ended up going onto Chael's podcast for an update, and he had some really interesting things to say about Doug.
And I'm trying to find the right analogy to make sure everybody has a very good perspective on this. You know, I'm not saying that Steve's a good guy. I'm not by any means going out there, and I'm not going to say it's Saint Steve. But I'm also not going to say he's the devil. If anything, he's exactly both and somewhere in between. He's like Cartman from South Park. He's like Rick from Rick and Morty. He is a absolute genius beyond anybody I've ever come across in my life. And I don't say that as somebody with Stockholm Syndrome. I say that as somebody who has a dual master's degree and really has a good grasp. And I'm around, I'm a college professor. I'm around educated people that are intelligent.
The video I mentioned earlier by Zach Riddle has a second part, and here's a comment that John Trosky himself left on it. Again, please go watch these videos. This guy was on it early, and he did a great job getting a lot of detail. Obviously, the story has much more depth, but I'm going to leave it at that. Coach Ray Longo made an appearance on the Anakin Florian podcast recently, spoke his mind, and accused Doug Crosby of stalking Ariel Helwani.
He's a judge helping a fighter fill out his forms for anything and then judging his fight. Just answer me that. Because we got problems. There's major problems. Ariel Helwani hit it dead on with his analysis. And the guy harassed him. He stalked him. Why is this guy still around? What happened to him? He didn't get rewarded. I bet he got penalized. We should get him on the phone. See how close, how Crosby, how did he approach you? What did he do? How did he fill out those forms for you? What did he tell you? This is a judge. Then he has to judge a fight. All right. You don't think that guy somehow hooked into Danny Sabatello? Are you fucking kidding me? Kenny, you know him. You know he knows people. You know he goes to gyms and talks to people. What the fuck is going on?
The more I research this guy, the more confused I get. He seems like a demon and a saint at the same time, the kind of person you either love or you hate. Seems like he can be very manipulative, and he's very connected to people high up in multiple fields. Do we want judges who act like he does? Who judge by their own criteria and associate with fighters and coaches? Who stuff people into holes? No, I don't.
I want to be serious with you for a second. You are an expert when it comes to the world of MMA. You're also a fan.
Say that a few more times.
But there's a reason there is a reason you're the longest standing with seniority judge in multiple states out there. But